Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, moni muli wanji, namaste, jambo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jedley, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We're coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We are so delighted and honored that you're joining us in our mission to help families grow closer through reading. One way you can do that is by connecting with us on social media, facebook.com/readingwithyourkids, at Jedley Magic on Twitter, and at Reading With Your Kids on Instagram. Our guest today is Dr. Lucille Burbank, educational consultant for Sesame Street. She is here to celebrate the inside secrets of Sesame Street. Before we invite Dr. Lucille in, we want to make sure to invite you to the debut of our special series, Protecting the Planet with Your Kids. It is going to be so much fun. My co-host Alexia Brown and I are speaking to many fantastic authors and experts who are going to tell us how we can talk with our kids about climate change, why it's important to talk to our kids about climate change, and how we can come together as a family to get active and actively get out there and protect our planet. It all starts April 22nd, Earth Day. Don't miss it. Protecting the planet with your kids. Joining us right now from sunny San Diego in California. I'm so excited. This is the Reading with Your Kids podcast, and so many of our listeners grew up listening and watching Sesame Street. And our guest today was such a vital part of Sesame Street. She's here to celebrate the inside secrets of Sesame Street. Please welcome to the show, Dr. Lucille Burbank. Dr. Lucille, how are you?
I am doing just fine, thank you, and I'm glad to be here.
I'm really excited that you're here. Sesame Street, as I told you before, I'm almost 100 years old. So Sesame Street wasn't part of my youth, but it was part of my younger brother's youth, and it was part of everybody's youth. Everybody was born, I think, after 1965. It was a huge part of their life. And I guess to begin with, in a nutshell, if you could just describe if there's somebody listening who grew up on Mars and doesn't know what Sesame Street is, can you give us the thumbnail description of it?
Yeah, you'd really have to have your head in the sand not to know about Sesame Street. They did a great marketing job, really. But I do find one or two people who don't know it. But at any rate, it's a beautiful show for preschoolers that combines learning via education. It has a beautiful blend of education and entertainment. And so it makes learning fun. It gives them an appreciation for learning, and it gives poverty children who can't afford preschool a heads up in learning things that they need for kindergarten and to get a head start so they aren't far behind. But most important, so they love learning. So it teaches a lot of cognitive, intellectual material, but it also teaches emotional material too. But it started out, hey, we have to give these children an advantage. They can't go to preschool. We can teach them so that when they go into kindergarten, they're right there at the teacher's level, and they're not behind, and therefore they won't fall behind, and they will continue to just love education and progress beautifully.
You know, what a beautiful service. We've talked a lot here on the podcast and encouraging families to read with their kids, pointing out to parents that, if you read to your kids 20 minutes a day, by the time they get to preschool, kindergarten, they've already heard almost 1 million more words than their peers who were not read to. So we want to, tell parents that so they understand that, there's a real benefit to reading with your kids. But I also think it's important when parents are hearing that they're also hearing the fact that there's a lot of kids who don't have the same benefits that our kids have. And I love that Sesame Street recognized that and sought to make a difference in those kids' lives.
Yes, it was very important. And it was a time when they were trying to fill the gap and not fill the gap, but really close the gap so that there wasn't, a child from Larchmont, New York who had all these great resources and then this other child, inner city child that maybe didn't have those resources. There wasn't that huge gap, and they could do that at that time. Now, Sesame Street debuted November 10th, 1969. It would only cost a penny a child to have all children go to preschool.
Wow.
Yeah, only a penny a child at that time. And it was exciting, even though they had Head Start, even though Head Start was going, it wasn't enough. Mm-hmm. And the wonderful thing about the workshop coming out of the 60s is there was a can-do in the air. They didn't, television was relatively new. They thought, hey, we can change it. We can make it really great. And let's see if we can get it to live up to its potential. Let's go there for these children. Also, they were learning through research that the younger child's brains are rapidly developing, rapidly. And so why not take advantage of that and just have them learn vocabulary and love reading and learn all their numbers and shapes and math and so forth. And this way, they're ahead of the game. But most important, learning is fun instead of dreary.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. My beautiful wife and I were talking at breakfast. There's our neighbor here. They have a 4 or 5 year old boy, and he is just the most amazing athlete. But we learned yesterday he's having a little bit of trouble with his numbers, and so my wife, who's a teacher, she's like, well, I have these resources. I'm going to share them with them. And I was reflecting back on when my son was that age and the way he learned to count. We were living on the second floor at that time, and we learned to count by counting up the stairs. 1, 2, 3, with the count. And,
nice.
And so my son actually,
I like the count.
For a long time, my son couldn't count without the
The beautiful thing about the Muppets, like the count, is they can do things that a human being can't do. The count can stand there and count grains of sand forever. Mm-hmm. And you really can't see a human being doing that. And the Cookie Monster, for instance, can sell his soul to the devil for a cookie. Mm-hmm. And we really can't have that role model. But then again, too, live people, as we all know, are so important on the show to illustrate tolerance, self-confidence, that people can get along of all types, of all kinds together in a neighborhood. And you can only do that or to combat bullying and everything. You need live people for that.
Yeah. We've talked a lot about some of the challenges that Sesame Street sought to overcome, to help kids who were challenged. So many ways that Sesame Street was helping those kids who were challenged. But I imagine there was a lot of challenges that Sesame Street had to face, that a lot of challenges that the creators had to face. I'm imagining that folks who were used to television didn't necessarily just throw their arms open to this new program that was flashing and fast and switching from scene to scene, and it was so different. Am I right about that?
They did a lot of PR, a lot of work with groups of people. I mean, they really spread the word. They would have workshops even before there was a videotape showing what the show was about. And they would say, they would say to the parents, you are your child's first teacher. And so let's show you that, and also we have a program that can really help your children, because all parents want the best for their children. And so they would have babysitters there at after school workshops or programs, and the people would come out, and they, at that time you talk about a TV program that was going to help your child, and the imagination just soared. However, finally they did have a videotape of the Muppets, and Joan Cooney, by the way, the co-creator of Sesame Street, was on, and they had something. But just the idea of, hey, you can do something for your kids. And that brings me to reading aloud, because I worked for the Family Literacy program, a foundation, but it's now called United Through Reading, and it's a reading aloud association that really does say, hey, you don't have to go back to school. You don't have to do too many things. Just simply read aloud to your children every day. And that will create strong bonds. It will create increased vocabulary. It will create emotional bonds and communication, great imagination and creativity. And it is, and I would run workshops, and I would say it's kind of like a little bit like Sesame Street. We'd go there and say, simply read aloud to your children every day.
Yeah. Isn't it funny that sometimes the simplest things have the biggest results?
They do. And, we wanted to really go there. And Sesame Street, too, when it was teaching the numbers or shapes or letters, it would just start with like a shape of a triangle. And you could go all over the place about teaching a triangle. And they just had all sorts of animation, or people talking about triangles, or the Muppets holding up triangles. Repetition was a key factor in learning. And I can remember my son watching Sesame Street. Because I was working there, and that's mainly what I'm very selective with television. That's mainly what he watched. And so one time, we were in the bedroom, and the sun was shining through the window, and it was hitting an object at a certain angle and making a triangle on the floor, on the rug. And he pointed at it and said to me, "Mommy, triangle, triangle." And that transfer of learning was so exciting. And you could see, and they would go all over the place with triangles, and then he could just identify a triangle out there in the real world. Yeah. Wow.
It's really amazing. And yeah, Sesame Street has taught so many kids about triangles and letters and numbers. But as you alluded to before, Sesame Street tackled a lot of really difficult social issues. The issues of bullying and racism and war and even gender identity. Did the producers get a lot of blowback from that? Did they hear from folks saying, hey, stick with the numbers. We don't need to get into this other stuff?
No. The reason they did the numbers and the cognitive material initially is because their whole aim was to make sure that everybody was having a good start in school, especially the children who couldn't go to preschool. And so that was the first aim. But then when they realized that, hey, we can stay on the air more, that they weren't sure how long they were going to be on the air. And 2, 3, 4 years goes by. Now they're doing a beautiful thing on racial literacy called the ABCs of Racial Literacy. And it's a conversation parents can have. It's an initiative. And it's a conversation to encourage parents to have with their children about their race, their identity, and racism in terms of what that means and to stand against any kind of racism. They've just come out. It's a new initiative. They've just come out with beautiful videos and segments on talking about skin color, hair color, fur color, and how it's okay to be different, and we all are, but we're all the same, and nobody is inferior, or no other race is superior. It's really good. It has just come open.
And I understand there are new characters out with this.
Yes, there's a couple of new characters. They're always inventing new Muppet characters, and it's Wes, which is a young black boy, and his father Elijah, and they are connecting with Elmo, who has red fur, and they're talking about the foliage and the turning of the leaves and the colors of the leaves, and they pick up a leaf that has red and brown, and they hold it together and they say, see, we're right side by side, equal as always.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. Now, what role did you play in the show?
What I did is I was a consultant with the research department, finding out what was working and what wasn't with our target audience. And also I met with the head writer, and we made changes to the scripts, because we had to make sure that the scripts included an educational element. Sometimes the producers or the writers would get carried away, and we just had to make sure, hey, the humor didn't dissolve the lesson about, like, let's say cooperation is important to do and why. And sometimes, the humor would disperse that or dilute that message. And our job was to say, hey, just remind them, make sure that this and this is in. So we would kind of revise the scripts together.
Yeah. I'm wondering, do you have a two questions? Do you have a favorite character, a favorite Muppet? And two, is there a favorite segment as you look back at all the years of Sesame Street? Was there one segment, one scene, one moment in Sesame Street that is your favorite?
Yeah. My favorite Muppet is Big Bird, the late Big Bird. A wonderful guy is doing Big Bird now, but Carol Spinney, who did Big Bird initially for over 46 years, he died 2019, December. But he also edited my book.
Oh.
Because I said to him, I have to make sure this is accurate. And he was so generous in doing that. And so the favorite segment was the death of Mr. Hooper. When I started there, they were Will Lee, who played Mr. Hooper, the storekeeper, after 12 years of being on Sesame Street, had died. And they wanted to be honest with the children and not say he went on vacation or he retired, but they're going to do head on the subject matter of death or the affective matter. They did. And, I had also interviewed Fred Rogers just before that. And so when they decided to be honest with the children, Fred Rogers had said to me, you know what we need, Seal, in everybody's lives? More honest adults. So I was excited that the workshop was being honest and going there. Norman Stiles, again, the head writer who I worked with, wrote a beautiful script. Research is a big part because without research, they don't know for sure exactly what's going on in the preschooler's head about death or any other subject. And so we did a lot of good research. The script goes something like Big Bird is being an artist and he's drawing pictures of everybody. And so he gives out these pictures of Maria and gives Bob his picture and Gordon his picture. And then he says, well, where is Mr. Hooper? And he'd sometimes call him Mr. Looper. But at any rate, where is Mr. Hooper? And Maria pipes up and says, or interrupts him and says, Big Bird, don't you remember we told you Mr. Hooper died? And so Big Bird says, oh, okay, I'll give him his picture when he comes back. And then Gordon comes and says to him, no, Big Bird, when people die, they don't come back. And so you see that puzzled look on his face, on Big Bird's beak. And he says, never. Well, that's so sad. And then everybody gathers around and, they really did this segment in one take because everybody had tears in their eyes and it was really one of the best. It won an Emmy and a Peabody.
Yeah.
So that was one of my favorites.
Yeah. Well, that certainly was, that was a time I've talked about it here on the show a number of times because we have had authors who have been on that have written about grief. And I know growing up in that era, I never attended a funeral until I was 16.
I know, me either. It wasn't, yes.
Yeah, it just was not talked about.
No, it wasn't. And that's why the Sesame Street was so revolutionary. It would talk about things that should be talked about. It would face things head on. It had the courage to do that, as well as it had this wonderful feeling of, one of the reasons it was so successful is because everybody that worked on Sesame Street loved children or had respect for the mind of a child. The mature work was working with children. It wasn't working with children and then going to adults. It was working with children and saying, hey, we can, and talking with them at the same level, although you have to make sure the vocabulary and the pictures are appropriate, but nothing condescending. Everything was very sophisticated and very high quality for a children's program. Mm-hmm. And that was, they were saying, hey, we really know how important you are and we respect childhood. And the viewers really could feel that. They also were, the viewers, the preschoolers were feeling like, hey, this is wonderful. We're learning something. Kids do not differentiate between work and play, between learning and going out and playing. Learning is playing to them. It's the same thing. Yes, we go outside and things like that, and we'll get into why it's so important these days to be outside instead of inside with the screens. But kids really, learning is fun. Yeah. And when you're doing something, and you know this, you and I as adults know this, the intrinsic reward of joy in enjoying what we're doing is so much more than the money.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. We have said here on the show so many times, there are parents out there who have this worry, their anxiety. I have to work. I have to get out there. I need to work 75, 80 hours because I have to have this huge nest egg so my kids can go to college. It's $70,000 a year. Now my kid's 5 is going to be $1 million a year by the time the kids get to college. I need to. And really what you need to do is to spend time with your kids now.
Exactly.
Your time with them now cannot be. You cannot calculate the worth to your kids. Yeah. It's just
you are so right. And you know, when there was a question about how we can create a healthier and smarter generation, and it's really threefold. First of all, we want to read aloud to our children. We also want to limit their screen time, develop a little bit more media literacy, like, hey, it's a means of communication, and it's not an end in itself. Media can enhance your life. It doesn't have to be, and it shouldn't be your life. The third thing too that I thought about is, having dinner time, all those wonderful talks, and the child can be telling about what happened during the day, what they're doing on social media, which is always good to know what they're doing. And then, of course, any kind of problems they have, and everybody can problem solve with them. Mm-hmm. And all those people discussions, people. That's what kids need. They don't need media.
Yeah. Well, I am a huge advocate for media literacy, a huge advocate for social media literacy. Parents, if you don't know what those two terms mean, push pause and Google it right away, because your kids are consuming, and you are consuming, vast amount of media, and you need to be literate and understand what you're doing and what you're consuming.
You really do. I characterize media literacy as how best to use the media. Mm-hmm. And you want to be selective, great deal of selectivity. You want to use it in moderation to enhance and enrich. If it's overdone, the child can get addicted. It's too much of a burden. And, but you want to always err on having your child outside. And then we just come in for a little bit of stimulation, mm-hmm. a little bit of fun, like a cultural event. We go to a play once a while, or we go to the opera, or we go to a birthday party, but we didn't have a birthday party every day.
That's right.
Okay. Yep. So we don't have to have media, all the time. And, really, it's just good. And also, I think as your child, especially as your child gets older, you should really know when they do watch TV or when they're on the computer, what they're watching. You really should know the shows they're watching. Mm-hmm. And it's not like you have to, invade their privacy, but just kind of, see what they're watching, and then, of course, maybe talk about it at mm-hmm. the dinner table or have a discussion about it. And same thing on the computer. The iPhone, please. Kids don't. My granddaughter does not have an iPhone at 13 years of age. They don't need an iPhone. And when they do have one, an hour at most, if not even less time. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. The problem with the internet these days is it's the old Wild West. Mm-hmm. And we are, you can bump into strangers, predators, all sorts of people that, as we were taught growing up, you don't go with a stranger. Well, with the internet and being on the iPhone or being on the internet online too much, you can be sitting right next to mm-hmm. a stranger.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it is dangerous.
Yeah. Yeah, no, we've absolutely, we've talked here in the show. Yes, you tell your kids, don't ever get into a stranger's car. Don't ever go anywhere with a stranger. But here's a phone. Here's this thing that actually allows the stranger to go into your bedroom.
Exactly. And no media in the bedrooms. No media in the bedrooms. No iPhone. No computer. No TV. None. It has to be in a central area so that everybody is kind of looking and seeing what everybody else is doing. There's some supervision. Mm-hmm. And no. Yeah. No, in the bedroom. I'm sorry. You really got me there.
Well, you're preaching to the choir. But I'm imagining you're okay with your child having lots and lots of books in the bedroom.
Books are wonderful. Remember when we would grow up, and I'm kind of the same generation as you, we'd get into a book and we'd have to go to bed, but we'd have a flashlight and the covers over our heads and we'd be reading and reading. Yep.
I remember my dad used to come in and catch me reading, and I would make believe that I fell asleep reading the book. And so the book would be open, but I'd be asleep, like faking it, and I'd hear my dad going, he goes, he fell asleep reading. That's my boy. And my mom would come in there and go, he's not asleep. Put that book away. Go to sleep.
I know. Sometimes we could fool one parent and not the other. Darn it.
Hey, well, I know folks are going to want to get out and get their own copy of The Inside Secrets of Sesame Street. It is available on Amazon. Are there other places in the virtual world we can go to?
Well, what's happened is that we have what's available on Amazon right now. No, I think the third edition is available on Amazon. We're having a little trouble with the publishing because we had a contaminated file. So they might have put it on, but they can get the second edition of Sesame Street, of The Inside Secrets of Sesame Street. The third edition, I did that because, one, I wanted to do a hardcover because it is pictorial and nostalgic, the book. And I want it to be like a semi-coffee table book. So we did the hardcover. It is expensive, though. Also, because Sesame Street reached its 50th anniversary in November 10th, 2019, there was all this stuff because the second one only went to about 45 years. And so I had to finish up. And the third edition is my last edition on Sesame Street. It's fine now. It's reached. It's over 50 years old.
Well, I am happy that Sesame Street is over 50 years old. I wish I was just over 50 years old. I am much older than that. But
wait a minute. So do I. I'm much older than that, too.
Well, we've had a great time speaking with the author of The Inside Secrets of Sesame Street, Dr. Lucille Burbank. Dr. Lucille, I've had such a wonderful time speaking with you. Thanks so much for being on the Reading with Your Kids podcast.
Oh, and be sure, I love it, and be sure to read to your kids, even if they can read to your kids every day. It'll be such fun. You'll see.
Please be sure to join us for the next episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Our guest will be Donna Galante. She'll be here to celebrate her middle grade novel, Unicorn Island. Don't miss it. That's the next episode of the podcast. Want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful. Of course, we want to start by thanking our guest, Dr. Lucille Burbank. Be sure to check out The Inside Secrets of Sesame Street. Also want to thank my team, Alejandra Doherty, Fatima Khan, Hannah Pat Oboyski, Alexia Brown. Want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we all want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place by Reading with Your Kids. I'll be looking for you the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.